Mistakes were made. My M3 is missing, my S2000 is too loud, and I have rented the cheapest car I could find. Let's road trip to Radwood. Before we get into the what, when, where, and why of Radwood, let's talk about the mistakes that were made. Over a year ago, I contacted a shop about modifications to my M3, and like everything with cars, we blew through the timetable. My car's still in the shop. My S2000 is a far simpler mistake. I added a single exit exhaust. It's loud and it sounds great around town, but it is miserable on the interstate. My last mistake I made is I got the cheapest rental car I could find, a Hyundai Kona. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on that car, and I'll get to them in a moment. But let's talk about Radwood. What is it? How often does it happen? Where does it happen? And why are we going? Radwood is a celebration of cars from the 1980s and the 1990s. It has 5 events across America for 2024. Places like Amelia Island, Detroit, LA, San Francisco, Tacoma, and Austin. Why are we going to Radwood? Well, I was born in the 80s and I was raised through the 90s, so I grew up with all these cars. I'm super nostalgic anytime I see a Survivor from that era, and this is a collection of them all in one place. So let's road trip to Radwood. My first stop was Quick Trip. I had to get my strawberry sprinkled donut on. It was an easy, uneventful drive for the first 300 miles until I hit my destination just outside of Dayton, Ohio. When I first pulled up, I was surprised by how old the hotel was, but it's a Hilton property, so I figured it had to be decent, right? After dinner, I was getting ready for bed and I realized that there was a noise coming from the bathroom. Sure enough, I walked in and the tub was leaking. So I rigged up a slide so the dripping water wouldn't make a sound, and while I was doing that, I realized the tub was dirty. And then I looked around and I realized there was mold in the bathroom. And then I noticed that the sheets and the comforter were discolored. Yuck. I learned my lesson about booking a cheap hotel outside of Dayton, Ohio. I don't recommend it. The next day I got up, got clean in the dirty shower, if that's even a thing, and worked from the hotel until checkout. So what's a road trip without a point of interest? And the one I had in mind was in Dayton, Ohio, the American Packard Museum.
So I was going to the Packard Museum over here, and check out this bug. This thing is so sick.
Now, I don't know a lot about cars before the 1960s, but this place was awesome. They had a lot of old engines and vehicles from the 1920s and the 1950s. They even had an engine on display from an old Spitfire fighter aircraft. It's a supercharged V12 called Merlin. There's actually a guy in the UK who put a Merlin engine in a car called the Beast. It's a one-of-one monstrosity in which most people ask why, and obviously the guy building it said, why not? It's brilliant. Anyways, in this museum, in the very back of the second building, tucked in the corner, I found my favorite car. It's a design from 1952 from Pininfarina that wasn't made until 1995. Apparently, some rich guy commissioned someone to build it because it was never put into production. After the museum, I hopped in the car and I made the quick 3-hour drive to Detroit. As I learned my lesson from the first hotel, I made sure to book something a little nicer this time. I landed in Detroit the night before Radwood, checked into the Hotel Indigo, and then hit the town. I saw some cool murals, I ate a fantastic meal at this old pub, and I even got a terrible selfie in front of a Detroit sign. After that, I headed back to the hotel to get some rest for the next day. But before we talk about Radwood, let's talk about the cheapest rental car I could find, the Hyundai Kona. I don't typically drive automatics, it's actually quite rare, and this CVT transmission was terrible. At slow speeds, I would floor it and it would sound like something was slipping. There would be this crazy vibration from the right side. Pretty sure it's not supposed to be making that noise. You had to floor it as it required tons of input from the throttle before it would get up and go. Overall, the drivetrain felt lethargic and not willing to put in the effort. The suspension was too tight, so you felt every single bump. The steering was over-assisted and so effortless, it was kind of scary. The cruise control was maddening. You would set a speed and then it would go up a hill and it would just drop and drop. And the only way to get back to the speed that you wanted to be at was to slam the pedal into the floor, defeating all of the savings you would get for fuel economy, which was the point in the first place of not going the set speed. It may not be the worst car in the world, but it's the worst car I've ever driven. Back to Radwood. I tried to sleep in, but
people have been slamming their doors all morning. They're monsters.
So I got ready, headed out the door, and tried to find a fix for my caffeine addiction. On the way to Radwood, there was a sign of hope. A small place called Down Under that had incredible coffee. So Radwood's rad. Like, there was a DJ playing music from the 80s and 90s for a good portion of the day, and people were dressing up in 80s and 90s attire. There were so many cool cars, and there was something for everyone. Japanese K cars, pristine, everyday survivors, German luxury cars, sports cars of the American, German, and French variety. There were project cars, there was even a gambler car, there was trucks, there were righteous supercars that were on posters in the 80s and 90s, and even incredibly rare cars like this Shelby GLHS. I talked to the owner of that car, and he actually owned 16 GLHSs. There were only 1,000 on that platform. If you ask me, the belle of the ball was this Honda CRX Strawman convertible. They only made 310. People were walking by it and they had no clue. Overall, Radwood was a blast. It really did feel like everyone was there to celebrate cars of this rad era, to have a little fun, to get away from life and the complications of it. So the real question is, did I dress up? I did. I dressed as Waldo. Back in 2012, I went to Coachella and I met a guy dressed as Waldo, and I thought it was hilarious. So I started doing it myself. On occasions when I go to big events where there's a lot of people, I'll dress up as Waldo. It's fun, it's silly, it brings a little bit of whimsy. People laugh, they point, they say I found you.
There he is.
And just to see their smirks and smiles is worth it. Radwood was great. I would totally recommend it and I would do it again. Thanks for watching.